1. So this happened roughly about 2 years ago. I worked at a hotel which had about 50 rooms between 3 floors. I was the only employee in the building after about 5 p.m. It should be noted I am a girl. The hotel is on the farther side of the city, but it's considered to be on the nicer side. So a lot of companies will send their workers to us for room and board instead of the shadier motels on the opposite side of the city. Some of them were great guests, others completely trashed everything, but that happens everywhere, I suppose. The layout of the building was pretty simple. You pull up to the front entrance, enter the foyer, and front desk and lobby is right through a set of automatic doors. Right across the hall from the lobby was a staircase leading up to the 2nd floor, and to the left was our elevators to the 2nd and 3rd floor. The 1st floor only has rooms on one side, to compensate for your pool, workout room, and breakfast area and dining room, lobby and the office rooms all being on the opposite side. The upper floors have rooms on each side, with the 3rd floor having the most rooms. Typically the 3rd floor the highest, we kept only for business and long stays. 2nd floor was reserved for short stays or bigger parties, and the 1st floor we kept open for elders who would have wheelchairs or walkers, or people who come in late at night for a one-night stay. Anyway, I was getting towards the last few hours of my shift. It was slow that night, aside from a few work groups I had checked in a few hours earlier. I noticed a raggedy, rusted and beat-up black pickup truck pulling up into the brightly lit carpet, so I got my paperwork ready for check-in. A guy gets out completely covered in dirt. I figured he just got off work, as most guys come in covered in dirt or oil. I do specifically remember that he reeked, which isn't too much out of the norm either. Entirely, I just chalked it up to him being an oil field or construction worker. I got his credentials, his name was Michael, and scanned it into the computer. He was also reluctant to leave his vehicle information with me, but I explained if he didn't, his vehicle was at risk of being towed by morning. I thought he caved just because he was only going to be here for the night. Michael requested a 2nd floor room close to the lobby staircase so he could have easy access to the front doors for smoking. Not out of the norm either. After taking his payment, I set up his room keys. I explained parking policies, and explained how he can get to his room, which was right up the staircase, and the door was on the opposite wall. He had a few bags with him and went upstairs. Almost immediately he comes back down the stairs and accuses me of giving him broken room keys. I had to explain if he put them next to his phone or anywhere near a magnet, potentially in his wallet, the keys will deactivate. I did offer to take him upstairs to open the room for him to make sure the new set of keys worked, and they did. He walked into his room by himself, shut the door, so with that, I was on my way back down to the lobby. When I got back in the office, something odd caught my eye on the cameras. He hadn't left the building, but his car wasn't in the front anymore. He didn't mention anything about having another person with him. If there was, we were supposed to charge a $10 fee per person. The side doors don't open unless you have a room key or are on the inside of the hotel, so I started to watch the cameras to make sure he wasn't trying to sneak people in. About 20 minutes pass and I notice nothing happening except him coming down the stairs. I smile politely and he goes outside. He stays outside for about 10 minutes, just standing in the carport. I can see it on camera. Now, while I thought that was a little weird, I just chalked it up to him taking a smoke. I stopped paying attention after a while and started to file my paperwork that was due before my shift ended. Michael ran back into the hotel, cigarette still in his mouth. I instructed him that he must take his cigarette outside and put it out. I told him prior we do not allow smoking inside the building. He just threw it on the ground and put it out with his shoe. He turned his attention towards the TV and ended up sitting in the lobby for an ungodly amount of time. He kept glancing towards the door, which made me uncomfortable. During this time, the friendly demeanor he had at check-in completely disappeared. He seemed paranoid and agitated now. He would whisper to himself, I couldn't hear what. After about 30 minutes of him doing this, I instructed him to go back up to his room because I cannot have people in the lobby when I'm working on closing procedures. It was a lie, but ownership allows us to make up reasons if we are uncomfortable with a guest's presence. Michael asks me to take him up to his room because he is uncomfortable and scared. I explained that I'm unable to do that for safety reasons. What I could do was watch him go up the stairs on camera, and he could call down to the office on his room phone when he arrived into his room. I was just trying to be friendly and get him upstairs as quick as I could. He goes upstairs, but immediately comes back down and informs me that he forgot where his room was and I would need to show him. I told him I can't leave the office or lobby. But I can explain it to him where his room was because it was super simple. He was continuing his whispers. This time it was about him losing his phone. I didn't pay any mind to it. After explaining to Michael where his room was, he went back upstairs and I heard the door slam shut. It echoed throughout the second and first floors and gave me chills for some reason. Almost immediately he comes back down and starts yelling at me, telling me I stole his cell phone, that I'm planning his demise, and I need to find his phone. This was completely bogus, as I haven't left the office since making sure his room key worked. He asked me for help and I just wanted him to go away, so I slipped a screwdriver in my pocket just in case he tried to attack me, and I began rummaging through the lobby couches looking for his phone. I didn't find it, but I did find his credit card, which he also began accusing me of stealing. I stood my ground and said if he can't respect me in my place of work, I can call the police and request to escort him into his room, or off the facility. He got angrier, snatched his card from my hands and went back outside. After about 20 more minutes, he comes back inside. He's calmer, but he asks if I would please go outside with him because there is something wrong with his car. After I absolutely refuse, he tells me that I need to go outside. That it's not fair, he's the only person out there working on his car, and he just needs some fucking help. I had to explain to him I am not allowed to accompany a guest outside of the building. He just starts repeating that I absolutely have to go outside with him. Now I have anxiety, and I tend to let my mind roam over wide horizons, and this was no different. I was about to have a panic attack, so I called the owners and asked them what I should do. It was my first hotel job, and although I have tons of freedom doing my job, I still want to know how to properly handle these situations. The owner told me that if I am uncomfortable and suspect he is under the influence or a danger to myself or himself, I have full reign to call the police, have them ban him from the property. I asked if they could just keep an eye on the cameras they have access to at home because he's acting weird. I locked all the lobby doors and made sure the side and fire exits were all properly secured and closed, so no one could sneak in. I did this while doing this on the phone with my boss because I was scared to leave the office by myself. After getting back behind the office, I locked the door, and I just braced for him to come back inside. My boss tells me to just watch the cameras and keep my cell phone nearby, just in case I have to call for help. Meanwhile, I noticed on the cameras I couldn't see Michael anymore. I didn't know where he parked, but I damn sure wasn't going to go looking. But what I did notice is there was another vehicle driving through our parking lot. I called the hotel next door to ask if the car was in their cameras too, and I was informed it was an unknown vehicle to their records. It was unknown to mine as well. This just shot my anxiety up even higher. The car would drive around the back of the building to the front, but avoid the carport, turn and then do the same to the building next door. The parking lot was almost empty, so I know they weren't looking for a parking spot. The car keeps going, and I'm watching it on the camera so focused that I didn't notice Michael came back inside. Telling Michael he either needs to go up to his room or vacate the premises, he just continues to yell at me saying I need to go outside with him. He won't move out from in front of the entrance. I imagine he was staying within view of whoever else he kept looking back at. Then randomly I see him sprint across the parking lot and out of the camera view. I also didn't see the car anymore after that. Since it was practically the end of my shift, I somehow managed to get everything done just in time for the next shift to arrive. I was so glad to see her I almost cried. I explained to her what happened and that the owners want her to keep the lobby doors locked. We put up signs explaining our doors were broken and due to safety reasons guests would have to call for entry, or use the side entrances for their room. I also deactivated Michael's room keys and told the next shift girl not to let him back. If he shows up, to call the police because he is a security risk. I made sure she watched me get into my Uber ride after triple-checking the vehicle and driver matched what my phone said. Since I was a regular customer of the driver, he asked why I was so riled up. I asked him to drive through the parking lot with his doors closed so I could see if Michael's truck or the other vehicle I saw driving across the parking lot were anywhere near the buildings, and they weren't. I have no idea what happened to them. The next day I had my boyfriend come stay the entire evening shift with me, just in case he came back, because I was told by my bosses that he never came to get his stuff. He wouldn't pick up the phone for calls either. Nothing happened after that night, or any other night, except for a month later. Michael came in asking about his stuff and if he could get a room. I refused his room, and luckily other people were there with me in the lobby and in the office. I had our maintenance man go retrieve his items and explain he is no longer allowed on the property. If we saw him, the police would be called, and he would be arrested for trespassing. Again, this wasn't true, but we didn't want him coming back at all. I noticed Michael had a different vehicle this time. It was a newer model SUV, and it was maroon. It matched neither his beat-up black pickup truck or the dark-colored sedan I saw driving in circles. If there was anything that sat with me even after all this time, it was that he remembered my name. He addressed me by name when he walked up to the counter, and at first I thought, oh yeah, my name is part of my uniform, until I realized I forgot to put on my name tag that day. After that, I refused to wear one in the hotel. Management let me create a fake name and wear that from that point on. It took me a while to feel safe in the building again while I was alone. I constantly had my boyfriend with me while I worked the evening shift. There is a chance the guy and the circling vehicle are unrelated, but my anxiety and the aura I got from Michael that night, it didn't feel good or right. 2. This is something that happened to me 5 or so years ago. I was fresh out of university with my degree in international development. I wanted to help underserved communities develop meaningful projects and see more of the world. I was young. I was naive. Eager to get started, I took one of the first jobs that offered me a position. It wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do, but it was adjacent to my interests and, more importantly, took me to a place I'd never seen before. I loved everything when I arrived. It was beautiful, sunny, and green. My new co-workers, all local staff, were amazing and so kind. My boss invited me to play soccer on Sundays with his family. My fellow project coordinator would go out dancing with me on the weekends. My roommate, a fellow expat working in development as well, was a fun and spunky woman I adored. I felt so blessed. Then one day it changed. I was walking downtown with a friend. There was a vegetable and fruit market that had great fresh produce directly from the farmers growing it. It was about a 20-minute bus ride from my apartment, so not close, but not incredibly far either. My friend and I loaded up and began walking over to a quiet corner to call a cab to help us haul our goods back, and I heard it. Hey, miss," and he gave my exact address. It took me a second to realize he was shouting my address. I turned around to see a man hanging out of his car, slowly crawling along the road with us. My friend recognized my address too. She turned to me and asked, "Do you know him?" I'd never seen him before. He kept shouting, "Yeah, you. You're living in the back house on the second floor, right?" That made it even worse. I lived in a big suburban lot with 2 houses, one in the front where my landlady and her family lived, and the second in the back. The second house was split into 2 apartments. The bottom floor housed 2 students, while I lived on the second floor with my roommate. You couldn't see the second house from the road, much less the stairway that led to the second floor. My heart was pounding. I wanted to shout back at the guy, but I was scared. I was a 22-year-old woman living in a foreign city, and I didn't want to draw attention. I didn't know how people would react. I didn't know how he would react. So we walked. My friend tried to comfort me, saying that maybe he knew my landlady's family. I was probably the only redhead in the whole country. He could be a neighbor I hadn't met. The encounter didn't leave me. It stayed in my mind. A week or so passed, and I stopped glancing behind my back whenever a car drove by. I started to feel secure. Then he showed up again. I was walking home from work. It was getting dark. My office was a 15 to 20-minute stroll from my apartment, perfect as a quick way to stretch my legs. I was halfway home when I felt someone watching me. Then the slow crawl of a car sliding up beside me. I knew it was him without looking. "Miss!" And again he yelled my address as if it was my name. He said, leaning out of his window, one hand on the wheel, "Why you shy?" I ignored him and kept walking. There was no one around. It was getting dark. "Come on," he cajoled. "Let me give you a ride. I know where you live." Not reassuring. I started to feel my chest tighten. I wanted to call someone, but didn't know what he'd do if I reached for my phone. I was practically jogging now, but he just sped up to match my pace. "Listen, bitch! You don't just ignore a man like that!" I wondered what I'd do if he stopped the car. He looked fit, young. He could probably catch me. He could hurt me. So I did something that in retrospect seemed absolutely bizarre. I yelled at him, wildly, rabidly. I did it in my first language, not what they spoke in this country. Not a language he would ever have heard, probably. I screamed curse words and threats, anything I could think of. I'll never forget the confused fury on his face, but he did slow down, letting me run ahead. I could see a woman at a bus stop at the intersection ahead. If I got to her, maybe she'd help. Maybe he'd get scared off. By the time I got to the woman, he was gone. I kept walking home, looking behind me with every step. I told my roommate about what had happened. She told me not to bother reporting it to the police, since they were corrupt and wouldn't do anything. When I told my boss, he told me the same. He said he had a baseball bat and would come whenever I called. I saw the man again 2 weeks later. He was sitting in his car, parked in front of the gates to my apartment. I'd been about to take out the trash, but retreated before he could see me. I told my landlady, and when she went over to confront him, he drove off. This continued for weeks, not every day, but once or twice a week. He was always there, waiting. I took cabs to and from work. I never traveled alone. I barely slept waiting for him to break in and kill me. My last weekend abroad, he almost did. I went out drinking with a group of my friends, 4 of us in total. We were celebrating the end of my contract, and I was happy to go home in a few days. I couldn't wait to see my family. I couldn't wait to put an ocean between me and the man. We had beers at a local bar, a 5 to 10 minute walk max from my apartment. When it started to get late, around 1, we tried to get a cab, but it was impossible. The roads were jammed and people were everywhere outside. Cabs couldn't even get to us. So we thought, even though others warned us not to, let's walk home. It would be faster than calling a cab. We'll be fine. We're a group of 4. No one will hassle us. We got halfway there when we had to cross the main road. There were no streetlights, not that kind of place. The road was absolutely empty, not a single car in sight. We crossed the road. A few more minutes, but then we were backlit with the bright headlights of a car coming up. We glanced back. A cop car, 2 men in the front. And I knew, even though I couldn't see from the bright lights in my eyes, he was driving. He was a fucking cop. The Jeep slowed, as I knew it would. He rolled down the window to drawl, "Hey, miss. Nice night, yeah?" My friends immediately knew who he was. I could see how nervous they were. We were alone on a dark, empty street in the middle of the night. They were cops, so they are armed. No one would intervene, probably. Too dangerous. "Your girls need a ride?" he leered, his friend, who I could see now was grinning hugely. My last few days, I thought, and this is how it ends? We sped up our pace. I don't know what our plan was other than to get away. Then I heard one of the doors of the Jeep open as a passenger jumped out. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life, although I didn't dare turn back to see. We were at the turn to my street now. 2 minutes more to get to safety. The car was right behind us. Whoever had gotten out of the car was right behind us. 2 of my friends were ahead now, while another clutched my hand and dragged me along. Then, out of nowhere, another car appeared. They were coming from the opposite direction, illuminating us all. When they slowed to see what was going on, I've never been so grateful. It was an older couple, and they looked concerned. I think they knew something very bad was about to happen. I heard, not saw, the car doors swing open. I almost got hit as they sped past us in a hurry. The other car stayed, watching. They offered to escort us home, driving alongside just in case. But I knew he wouldn't come back. Not tonight. I still took a cab with my friends to their place for the night. We took my roommate with us, just in case. Nothing happened after that. My last 2 days were uneventful, although I couldn't shake the feeling that he might show up at any given moment. Driving to the airport, all packed up and ready to go home, my cab got pulled over by a cop. My stomach dropped. Couldn't breathe. It wasn't him, although it could have been. It wasn't until I got on the plane, until I landed in my home country, that I finally felt that terror leave me. I still get nervous when cars drive up behind me, when men roll down their windows to shout at me. It's never him. But still, you never know. 3. Lately I've been noticing something off about home. Like there's something else here with me, my wife, and our 2 dogs, but I have not been able to put my finger on it until today. For some context, I live in a duplex. We share the property with another guy in his mid-20s. He has his own house and we have ours, but we share the laundry room that leads to our respective backyards that are separated by a fence. This all started around 2 months ago, when the guy sent me a text. "Hey man, just a heads up, someone stole my bike out of the sunroom." This is extra creepy because to get to our sun and laundry room, you would need to hop the brick fence surrounded by shrubby trees and then hurl the bike over. Unless the thief had the most massive pair of balls ever and walked it out through one of our front doors when we weren't home. Either way, I didn't feel right and made more of an effort to keep the door locked. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago. I let my dogs into the backyard and one of them starts sniffing at the shed. No big deal. The lizards are coming out with it heating up. They had probably just chased one under the door. I finally got them to come in, but didn't give it much thought. I hardly ever go into that shed. Nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of out of the way, and I'm not really a hang out in the shed type of guy. So we generally use it for storage. Suitcases, furniture that doesn't fit or match the house, camping stuff. You know, boring suburban shit. We probably enter it maybe 3 times a year. After the 18th day in a row of my dogs being curious about the shed, I decided to have a little look-see to see if maybe there was a Komodo dragon or something in there, since they wouldn't let this thing go. No Komodo, but what I did find literally made me piss myself just a little bit. Just a few drops. Inside the shed was a bag that my neighbor had stolen a little while back. My first thought was, oh fuck, my wife is a klepto! But quickly rolled that out. She doesn't even like to bike. Then I was briefly worried that my neighbor thought that I was the thief. I mean, it's in my shed. I don't know how to explain that if he found out, plus I wanted to give him his bike back. I kept looking around and found one of our sleeping bags unraveled, but balled up behind a box. Inside of it was a sack of what looked to be around $20 in change in singles. There was also a bag for garbage and had lots of food wrappers inside. Eventually, my brain accepted what it was ultimately denying at first, and put 2 and 2 together. Someone, I don't know who, is living in my shed. Or at least was. Maybe my dogs picked them off. Or maybe they sleep there every night and leave during the day. If they weren't coming back, why would they leave the change? I left everything how I found it, and I'm thinking about what I should do next. Whoever did it must have gotten in through the spare set of keys I keep hidden in my backyard. I locked up and brought them inside with me tonight. Hopefully whoever it is gets the message and moves on. I'm going to install cameras tomorrow. For 3 days and nights, my cameras have not picked up anything, so I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. The bad news is no creepy footage for you guys. The good news is for me, no footage. But the story doesn't end there. A few people suggested I contact some local homeless shelters. After all, I didn't want to get police involved and ruin someone's life potentially, and this very well could have just been a person who hit rock bottom and needed any kind of shelter. So I called around these past few days and explained this story to some people who knew the homeless population. The first few conversations went something like this. "It doesn't sound like anyone I know of, but let me hook you up with..." After about the 5th or 6th time of telling it, and then to hit up someone who may know, I got a bite. Susan has been here working with the homeless community in my city for 3 decades. She listened to what I had to say with eagerness, and I could tell she had a light bulb go off almost immediately. "The bag of food wrappers you found? Were there a bunch of party mix little bite muffins?" This was it. She was dead spot on. There were probably like 10 in there. You've got nothing to worry about. That's Old Man Dan." Susan proceeded to tell me the brief version of Old Man Dan's life. Old Man Dan is a supposed Vietnam veteran who, like many of his peers, fell in hard times. She said that he has probably lived more of his life homeless than he probably has functioning within society. They feel like he suffers from a multitude of mental health issues, such as PTSD and multiple personality, but has never been a concern for violent outbursts. He has mostly kept his head low and just tried to hang out. He also has a habit for shoplifting boxes at a time of party mix little bites from the grocery store. I guess are his favorite. But Old Man Dan was infamous for one thing: setting up little bases around town. Some, they said, had gone years undetected. Other times he's caught in a day. There are usually little bite strappers found in these places. That's what usually gives his identity away. They said he's really good about not going back to where he's not welcome. He's just trying not to draw attention. Some of his local hideouts include under the bleachers at a high school, the away team's bench, less security, abandoned swimming pools like one's swim teams would practice at. He had a tent on a golf course, but his most common are a plethora of sheds and guest houses he can find a way into. So now that I know that my wife's life, my precious baby pups, my neighbors, and my life are not in any immediate threat, I took a moment to ponder my next move. I asked if Susan would come by and grab his stuff and track him down. She said she knew his usual spots. I tossed his trash, it was just wrappers, no cans or recyclables, but gave her the stack of cash and coins, with a little extra from my coin jar. I also let her give him the sleeping bag. My neighbor kept the bike. Anyway, hopefully that's the end of this saga. I'm moving this summer anyway, so not really anything to worry about long term. But although I knew his intentions weren't malicious, part of me still feels violated that this was even happening. How many nights did he sleep out there without me knowing? I shudder at the thought. So, Old Man Dan, if I see you on the street, I'll throw you a few bucks and a water, but let's not meet in my shed. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 544. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you liked the video, then please do poop the like button. If you're operating on a touch screen, maybe those kind of little darts with the spongy ends on them, you could use it like target practice to hit the like button. Could be fun. Just don't damage your tablet or your phone. And of course, leave a comment and hit subscribe if you'd like to see more videos. I'd certainly like you to see more, but this isn't about me. Right, I'm going to wrap this video up, then I'm going to go play some more No Man's Sky. I've been having 2 issues with the game. One I was actually able to fix because it was a self-created issue. I run mods on the game. I'm currently only running 1. I was running 2, but I'm only running 1 now. That speed up the refiners in the game for processing materials, right? Because you can do a lot of wonderful stuff with them. In fact, you can actually make, if you need like metal, like copper, indium, emerald, that sort of thing, cadmium, you can basically just get a few hundred and have as much as you need by using chromatic expansion. It's like witchcraft, it's great. Well, I guess alchemy is the word, but still, it's also great. And the problem I was having was there's a thing called tainted metal they introduced at Halloween, I didn't really know what to do with it, because I'd heard you could refine it into nanites, because I got some recently. And actually, you can. It's actually quite good. If you've played the game, nanites are very much essential to upgrading your equipment. So I'm going to go hunting for tainted metal later, because I had a little problem where I wasn't able to refine it. It was a mod conflict. I fixed that, and I'm going to be doing that later. Don't know if I'll stream it. We'll see how sleepy I am, because I forced myself to get a bit earlier than I had been, because my sleep schedule got kind of messed up again. Entirely my fault this time. I should have been a good little Hellfreezer and been going to bed at a reasonable time, but I was getting work done later. Some stories were a bit slow coming in and things like that, so I ended up getting videos done later. That seems to be settling down now, though. And when I'm done with work, I kind of need to decompress, which often involves me sitting on the sofa, either watching episodes of Bones, which after years I'm finally watching the episodes I haven't seen, or playing video games and chit-chatting to people and things. So I'm rambling on because I'm sleep deprived. I'm starting to talk nonsense. Okay, I'm going to head off from now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.